All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's briefing, everyone. I'm Dr. Damian Wolf. Now, in my 15.5 years researching metaphysical anomalies here at the Foundation, I have seen reality bent in ways that would absolutely give a theoretical physics professor a migraine. But this explainer? We're focusing on a particularly fascinating and honestly deadly paradox, SCP-740, or the Hindenburg photograph. We are talking about a modern Polaroid that perfectly captures a historical disaster decades before that kind of camera even existed. It's a temporal and physical impossibility, but more importantly, it hides a deeply dangerous metaphysical trap.
To really wrap our heads around what we're dealing with, we got to look at the human element first. The anomaly's previous owner, a guy we call Mr. F in the files, famously said, "I've watched men burn to death because they weren't worthy." And look, that wasn't a metaphor. He literally stood there and watched people burn to ash, using this photograph as some sort of twisted litmus test for human worth. It just immediately sets the stakes here, you know? We aren't just dealing with a cursed object that accidentally hurts people, we're dealing with an item that has a very real history of active, intentional, and fatal deployment.
So, that brings us to the core mystery for today. What actually happens when a photograph burns you alive? I know, it sounds like a trick question, right? With my background in psychology, I can tell you that the human brain is completely hardwired to categorize a photograph as a passive, harmless record of the past. But SCP-740? It violently shatters that categorization. Today, we're going to bridge the gap between this seemingly innocuous piece of film and the visceral, terrifying reality of its anomalous effects.
Let's define exactly what we are looking at. SCP-740 is a slightly dirty, color-corrected Polaroid photograph. It clearly depicts the explosion of the Hindenburg airship at Lakehurst Naval Air Station on May 6, 1937. And here's the kicker. Forensic analysis confirms it's a genuine photograph of the actual event. The burn patterns and structural collapse perfectly match the surviving historical newsreel recordings of the disaster. But obviously, we have a glaring anachronism here. A color Polaroid capturing a 1937 event is just impossible under normal physics. It's a visual paradox that immediately flags the thing as anomalous, way before you even physically touch it.
Now, despite its fatal properties, SCP-740 is actually classified as safe. Why? Well, because it literally doesn't do anything unless you touch it. The mandatory safety measures are deceptively simple. Standard envelope, standard security deposit box. But listen up, especially any junior staff reviewing this as part of your containment training. The greatest risk here is the cognitive temptation to view the photograph up close without protection. You must wear gloves at all times. A few millimeters of latex or nitrile is literally the only barrier separating you from a very painful, fiery death. Direct skin contact is the only trigger.
So what happens without those gloves? Well, a clinical, completely inescapable countdown begins. Step 1, bare skin contact immediately triggers massive auditory hallucinations and a cognitive trap that makes it incredibly distressing to just drop the photo. Step 2, after exactly 1 minute of holding and looking at it, your core body temperature rises and you feel this intense growing heat. Step 3, between 2 and 4 minutes in, your physical body will actually start to emit smoke. And finally, Step 4, spontaneous, fatal combustion. And the time it takes to fully combust? That correlates directly to the subject's size and weight.
The difference in recovery time perfectly illustrates the metaphysical cruelty of the object. When that spontaneous combustion happens, the human victim has upwards of 90% of their body mass consumed. It is universally fatal, zero recovery. But the photograph itself? During the event, SCP-740 is also completely consumed by the fire, only to anomalously self-repair its ashes over the next 5 to 18 hours. It just restores itself to its original condition, completely ready for the next victim. It is a perfect, self-sustaining loop of destruction.
Section 8. Case Study. The Mansion Incident. Interview Log 740-01.
To understand how the Foundation actually secured this thing, we need to look at the harrowing first-hand account of Agent M. His retrieval mission is basically a masterclass case study in how cognitive hazards can totally derail an operation. So the setup seemed pretty standard. Agent M was sent to a massive New England mansion owned by Mr. AF in March of 19X. The Foundation had been tracking the object for weeks because Mr. F actually tried to sell it at an auction, but the sale failed because the auctioneer suddenly died. Official cause of death? Smoke inhalation, but we know it was spontaneous combustion. Despite knowing this, Command considered it a low-risk retrieval. So Agent M approached the front door alone while his team hung back in the driveway. Just think about that, a supposedly low-risk approach, right after a mysterious fiery death.
Once inside, Mr. F willingly hands the photograph right to Agent M.
But because Agent M wasn't wearing gloves, since we didn't know the specific trigger at the time, the anomaly activated. Agent M reported hearing a horrific scene projected right into his mind. Explosions, fire, men, women, children just screaming in pain and terror. And guys, this isn't just background noise. Standard cognitive resistance techniques like mental grounding or psychological compartmentalization, they completely fail here. The sensory deception manipulates human cognitive defenses so absolutely that victims literally forget they have the physical ability to look away or just drop the object.
So, as Agent M is totally paralyzed by the sensory overload, Mr. F breaks his concentration just enough to say, "You hear them too, don't you? You're all the same, blast it." This was huge. Mr. F essentially revealed that everyone he ever showed the photo to heard the screaming, but he himself didn't. This confirmed that Mr. F was somehow completely immune to the auditory cognitohazard, and he was using it to judge people. In his twisted mind, if you heard the screams, you were deemed unworthy.
When Agent M finally managed to state he was leaving with the photograph, the whole situation instantly escalated into violence. Mr. F demanded it back, yelling about how he'd watched unworthy men burn. Then, despite being this frail old man, he lunged at Agent M with incredible strength, knocking over his chair. And Agent M reported that there was literally fire pouring out of Mr. F's eyes and off his head. So between the overwhelming screaming in his mind, the burning photograph he's physically compelled to hold, and now this sudden paranormal attack, the veteran agent's psychological defenses just entirely crumbled under the sensory deception.
Which brings us to the number 3. That is the exact number of shots an experienced but fully panicked Agent M fired from his service weapon to neutralize the threat. Under normal circumstances, standard protocol dictates you retreat and call in your team. But he completely bypassed that because the cognitohazard had induced a state of absolute terror, so he fired 3 times, grabbed the envelope, and sprinted out of the house, already feeling the anomalous heat of the photograph rising inside his own body.
The timeline of the resulting destruction was just incredibly rapid. At 0 minutes, Agent M bursts out of the house. By minute 1, thick smoke is already pouring out from the mansion's roof. By minute 3, the entire massive New England mansion is totally consumed by flames. Forensics later determined that the ignition point was exactly where Mr. F's body landed after being shot. The old man's body acted as this massive anomalous ignition point, setting the whole structure ablaze in just 3 minutes, all while Agent M's team was desperately out in the driveway trying to pry the photograph from their commander's rigid fingers.
So, what's the real takeaway here? We have to understand the human cost. Before this incident, Agent M had 6 successful SCP retrievals as a team leader. He had years of steady, reliable, veteran field experience. But after the incident, he developed acute pyrophobia, just an extreme, debilitating fear of fire. And even more alarming for us over in the psychology department, standard amnestics completely failed to cure his condition. The mental trauma was rooted so deeply by the anomaly's cognitive manipulation that he had to be permanently reassigned to desk duty. That is the power of a metaphysical trap.
Which leaves us with a rather haunting conclusion for today's briefing. If survival means losing your mind to the fire, are you ever truly safe from SCP-740? Sure, the object sits quietly in a deposit box today, officially classed as safe. But the lingering trauma inflicted on Agent M proves that a cognitive hazard can burn your mind long after the physical flames are extinguished. It's a stark reminder for all of us handling these anomalies. Following protocol isn't just about keeping the world safe from the object, it's about keeping your own mind intact. Thank you for your attention, researchers. Class dismissed.